So as you can see here, I recently purchased an RC10 B5 team kit. As you may already know, Team Associated offers the B5 in both the rear motor and mid motor configurations as separate chassis. I purchased the rear motor configuration because I'm used to driving rear motor, and I had actually tried this out on one of my friend's B5s and it felt really nice. So I didn't personally feel the need to go mid motor. But in any case, I just wanted to show you what I have so far through this build process. I've basically just gone through the first page. Let me just move this out of the way here. The first full page of the build process. And I thought it was quite interesting. And there are two things I want to point out here for the build process. They're both, none of them are bad. First off, the Team Associated instructions, as is typical of their instructions, they're excellent, very well illustrated. Parts are nicely labeled. The parts bags are labeled. It's very similar to building a B4. It's very nice. I cannot say the same about my Kyosho laser. If you go and watch my build series for the Laser ZX5, I talked a bit about how that manual was not very good and the parts bag labeling was very poor. Chassis itself was great, but the instructions sucked. Here, the instructions are great, and as I understand it, the chassis is also great. So, let me see if I can get the lighting right here. Okay, so for the first part of the build here, you're putting together the steering rack and then mounting it to the front of the chassis. By and large, the assembly is fairly similar to the B4, although there are a few small differences. First, the ball stud, the inner ball stud that mounts to the steering link, faces out like this rather than vertically as in the B4. So I can actually show you my B4s and my trusty B4.1 factory team. I've been running this for about 2 years. It's a great chassis. So maybe you can see here, right? So you see this ball cup mounts into a ball stud that mounts vertically. Okay, so what this means is that on the B4 rack, if you wanted to adjust Ackerman, it was fairly straightforward. You just change either the ball stud going into this hole or this hole here. But the problem is that's the only Ackerman adjustability that you have. If you mount it, the ball stud forward facing like this, you have more fine tuning that you can add to your Ackerman. You can do it, say, in 0.5 millimeter or 1 millimeter increments. If you have, say, 0.5 millimeter washers or spacers, you can put in here between the ball stud and the mounting point. So you get more adjustability this way. That's good. Also, all of the ball studs in the B5 kit come with O-rings, just like your standard shock O-rings that you mount around the ball stud. If this is opposed to the little foam spacers you put on the ball stud in the B4. I actually don't have many of these left. They have ripped off over time, and I assume that's why they went to these rubber O-rings instead. I expect they'll be more durable and they won't tear off. So that's one thing. The other thing is the steering rack itself. Instead of having 4 ball bearings in the B4 rack, it has, there we go, that's better lighting. It has 8 ball bearings in the B5 rack. So you have your standard 4 ball bearings in the center of the bell crank, as you would here, in this part of the bell crank here, okay? But also where the cross brace mounts to the bell crank, there's another set of ball bearings in there. So it's a total of 8. As opposed to in the B4, what you have is, again, on this same cross brace where you can adjust Ackerman, you just have a screw that goes through a bushing that goes through the cross brace onto the bell crank. And so over time, that gets very, very sloppy. And also, these screws can tend to back out as this wears in. So I expect that on the B5 you won't have that problem, because the way it works is you have a screw that goes through these 2 ball bearings and it screws right into these 2 guys here. So if anything, maybe the threads on these pieces will start to wear, but since the screw locks into those and rotates through a ball bearing, I really don't see how there would be too much stress placed on those threads. But I expect this to be overall a much tighter steering assembly. It won't wear as much over time because it's ball raced 8 times rather than only 4. Okay, so that's something I wanted to point out that was kind of interesting, and I certainly appreciate Team Associated doing that to the B5. On this side here, you're putting together the spindle carriers, the caster blocks, and mounting them to the front arms. Now, they do add some adjustability for the B5, but they also take some out. Okay, so the parts that they add is on either side of your spindle carrier, there are these little spacers here. Okay, and this is the number 3 spacer. And here you have the stock setup uses either the number 2 or number 4. It's the same spacer, it's just whether you flip it around, it's either in the 2 position or the 4 position as the instructions say here. Okay, and what that means is because this hole here is offset from the center, if you mount it one way or another, it's going to move the wheel axle forward or backward. So you can adjust how much trailing axle you get. Now you don't have that on the B4, so this is extra adjustability that you're getting. You also get 2 different front bulkheads, one with a 25-degree kick-up, one with a 30-degree kick-up. The B4 bulkhead is just a single bulkhead. I actually have the STRC aluminum bulkhead in here because the original B4 bulkhead wears very fast. I think it's a 30-degree, can't remember, that or 25. Here you get the option for both. You also get, in addition to kick-up, some adjustability in caster. So you can either set it to 0 degrees extra caster, or there's another insert that adds 5 degrees of caster. So the stock setup is an additional 5 degrees, so I'm running that. This entire build I'm going to do only the stock setup, and I'll see how that works. A lot of my friends are running the stock setup on their B5s and they're very happy with it, so I'm going to do that here. So okay, you get adjustable caster, adjustable kick-up, adjustable trailing axle, but the one thing that you don't get is adjustable spindle carrier height. Okay, so in the B4, I'm going to see if I can do this. You have 2 spacers between the caster block and the spindle carrier, and you can mount them both on the bottom, both on the top, or one on the bottom and one on the top. And that allows you to adjust the vertical placement of the front spindle carrier. And say if they're both on the top, that pushes the front ride height down and gives you more turn-in speed or more entry cornering. And likewise, if you put those spacers on the bottom, you get a little more understeer if your car's a little loose. So this is a very nice adjustment to have because it allows you to basically adjust the front ride height without impacting the suspension geometry or the steering geometry if you offset these spacers with the appropriate amount of spacers under your ball set on the front spindle carrier here. Here you don't have that. You have a fixed vertical position for the spindle carrier. Okay, very much like the old RC10s, they had fixed vertical spindle carrier positions. So that's one mode of adjustability that you do not get with the B5 coming from the B4. So you lose one, but you gain 3 other modes of adjustability with parts that are standard to the kit. Now, of course, I can always buy 25-degree and 15-degree caster blocks, and maybe I could buy different types of spindle carriers here, but that requires me to buy more parts. So I just wanted to point that out. I'm going to keep going here with this build, and the next set here, oops, let me move this out of the way, is the, what do we got next? Oh, basically finishing off the front suspension, mounting the arms, shock tower, starting with the rear, and then the differential going to the gearbox. So I'll get through all that, and if I have any interesting comments to add, I'll make another video, and I'll discuss it. So for now, thanks for watching.